In the early 1990s, I was fresh out of high school, going to college part-time and working at the local video store. My mom, who was paranoid anyway, hated me working there because it was open till midnight every night and because all of the creepy dudes hanging around in the back room. You know the back room which I speak of. One thing you can count on when working at a video store, I'd already worked at another one prior to this. A large national chain is regulars. When videotapes were big and before you could rent anything on demand, some people wanted to see every new movie that came out the day it came out. If you opened on a Tuesday, depending on what movie was coming out, you would dread the pushing and shoving before you even got out of bed. Grown adults acting like 6-year-olds over the newest movie. I can't even watch Dances with Wolves to this day. Some regulars you don't mind, some you hate, and some you actually have good relationship with, and of course, some you date. That's how my first marriage started. He was a movie snob though. Should have known that wasn't gonna last. Anyway, one of my regulars at the store was a guy named Mike. Mike seemed like a regular dude. His wife liked to watch all the new movies the day they came out, and he was just your regular average Joe. He brought us donuts and candy on a regular basis, and we'd do him the ultimate video store no-no. Hold A1 titles. Yikes, but the guy bribed us with donuts, and I cannot be responsible for my actions. The problems with Mike began when he stopped being an AM regular. We called him the coffee clutch, since they usually browsed the store with a coffee mug, way before Starbucks, so it was either a to-go cup from the gas station or a thermal-style cup, and started being a PM regular. These were dubbed the beer badge, since they usually stopped off at a bar after work, then came in for videos on the way home, or just came in super late at night to pursue the backroom titles without running into a neighbor. Mike was the latter. Turns out his wife had left him because Mr. Regular Joe, not even that attractive, was a serial adulterer. He was a phone repairman and apparently had been making lots of long-distance calls with his customers. Okay, that was a terrible analogy, but you get the point. Mike started coming in late at night, smelling of some kind of alcohol usually, and he went from regular nice dude to creepy nice dude. Every woman reading this knows what I mean. He no longer commented on the weather. He commented on how he was glad it was summer so that us cuties, that's what he called all the girls who worked at the store, were wearing shorts again. Nothing overtly perverted, just enough that we knew he was thinking of us sexually. The dude was in his 40s and kinda goofy looking, plus some of the younger girls had either babysat his kids or went to school with them. A few months after the drinking and the coming in late to rent porno started, our store started having issues with the phones. They started to act up. Sometimes we couldn't make calls, couldn't get calls, and had staticky lines. Every time it happened, it was after midnight right after close. Mainly, we noticed because some of the girls would have to call for a ride, call a parent to let them know they were leaving the store. The really odd thing was when the opening manager got there and read a note about the phones acting up. He tried the phones and they were just fine. He even finally called the phone company to have them check out our equipment and lines, and there were no problems. After about 2 weeks of this, somebody finally mentioned it to Mike, since he was a phone repairman. Mike, nice guy, said, "Well, next time that happens, just call me." He worked seconds and didn't really sleep till later in the night anyway. So a few nights later, me and a girl named Jen closed, and sure enough, when she tried to call her folks to tell them she was going out to eat with me, she couldn't get through. So we felt bad, but we called Mike on his newfangled device called a mobile phone. He said he wasn't quite home yet, so he'd turn around and come back and look at it for us. He showed up in the parking lot about a minute later, even though he'd been gone from the store for at least 15. It was weird, but he said something about being at the gas station which contradicted his story about driving home. But I shrugged it off because it only took him a few minutes to reconnect our stuff and get us back to normal. Jen called her parents, but Mike just stayed in the store talking to us about his life and how lonely he was and how his wife hates him until we realized it was 2 a.m. and he had to go. I just drove Jen home, ate a peanut butter sandwich, and went to bed. A few nights later, I was closing with another girl, Shelly, but she lived right across the street. I told her to go ahead and leave and called Mike to report our problem again. And again, he was in our parking lot almost immediately after. Since his house was about 10 minutes away, small town, we all knew where everybody lived. I wasn't sure of his story about not wanting to change out of his robe over boxers, but he fixed the phone then and started to chat me up. By some small miracle, Shelly had forgotten her lunchbox and came knocking on the door a few minutes later. Mike seemed flustered, probably because he was basically in his underwear and left quickly. I told Shelly about it and told her we needed to talk to the manager and the other girls because this was not normal. A few nights after that, the phones acted up again, and Shelly called Mike, but she also called her boyfriend who showed up just as Mike got there and hung around. Mike left immediately after fixing the phone. Might have to do with Shelly's boyfriend being about 6'5" and a beefy quarterback at our high school. We had our employee meeting the next day, and I brought up the problem of Mike. I mean, he was a customer, a good customer, ever since the store had opened 3 years before. We didn't want to alienate him, didn't want him contacting the store owner, but we didn't want him hanging around all night and coming in after close to fix the phone, so we all agreed not to call him anymore, even if the phones weren't working. After that, the phones acted up pretty regularly right after close and were miraculously fine again the next morning. We simply adjusted our habits to not need the phone at or near close, and eventually started using the payphone at the gas station if we really needed to. One day I was working with the manager during the day because we had inventory, and a guy from the phone company came in. Apparently something had tipped them off about Mike, and they wanted to conduct an actual sting operation for him at our store. The minute the guy said Mike's name, it all clicked. I mean, I feel stupid that it took us so long to figure out what was going on, but Mike had been in our store almost every single day for 3 years, so it was hard to realize that he was the one jacking with the phones. Turns out that Mike had been leaving the store after renting his videos, going around the back, no windows by the way, parking lot wrapped around the building, so he parked out there to avoid suspicion, and jacking with our phone lines. If he got no call, he straightened things back out after he saw us leave. The phone company hired a private eye to hide down the street and take photos to prove this was happening. I had to wait on this guy for 4 days in a row after this, knowing that there was a PI sitting down the street waiting to bust him. Mike had been doing this at multiple businesses in town where young women worked late, and he'd been doing it to his neighbors at his new apartment, hoping they would notice his phone company truck and ask for help. And he's been messing with wires at his daughter's friends' houses too. So not only the 18 and 21-year-olds at the video stores and bars, but now this guy was trying to mess with young girls too. Mike got fired from the phone company, kicked out of his apartment, and sentenced to 3 years of probation with huge fines for his BS. He wasn't allowed in any of the businesses where he was jacking with the phone, so as far as I'd heard, it was the only video store in town. 3 bars, a gas station, and the grocery store. Eventually, he moved to the next town over, which is much larger and blended in with people there. He even lost his visitation with his children for a number of years because he was grooming kids to be molested. Tensions were high around our apartment complex when I was around age 10. In a month's time, we had a man that had died in a unit, a partial fire in a building leading to reconstruction, and a child that had been hit by a car, who later survived. Even at a younger age, I remember distinctly having a strong grasp on the bizarre events that were taking place. It had to be around spring 1997. My mother was single and raising my little sister, about 5 years old, and me. She managed a different complex and would pick us up from school and drop us off at our apartment while she returned to work for a couple of more hours. I have 3 older siblings whom all moved out, that at some point had to keep an eye on each other at a young age, so this wasn't really a new premise. There was no money for a sitter. The oldest just had to assume the role, which was me. For the most part, we were really quiet kids in our second and third story unit. We played with our toys, watched a little television, and sometimes played Sega or Nintendo. On this particular afternoon, I recall playing with a Dash Render figurine from Star Wars, while my sister was doing whatever in the same living room. Suddenly, the doorknob started violently shaking. My heart dropped, and I remember it being the first time I had felt such terror. I rushed to the phone and paged my mom, 911, and then dialed 911 to let the operator know that somebody was breaking in. The operator reassured me that help was on the way. The door handle was still being messed with, but I was nervous if the deadbolt and chain would be enough. A couple of loud bangs happened as if there was someone ramming the door with their shoulder, then it all just stopped. The cops arrived shortly before my mom, only to find a note from the maintenance man saying something like, "Air filter check." Now the maintenance man claimed that he announced himself verbally, but I knew it was BS. Of course, the cops did nothing, and my mom's complaint to the office didn't result in this man being fired. Unfortunately, this wouldn't be the most unnerving part of the story. My mom said the guy would stare her down in the parking lot and just smile at her. The whole situation creeped us out, and we wanted to move, but we couldn't afford the expenses. One night a couple of weeks later, I was awakened by a loud thud coming from the roof. Being so easily rattled from the previous event, I ran to my mom's room to wake her up. She checked around to make sure everything was in place and reassured me that it was probably a rodent. We went to school the next morning and were dropped off at home in the afternoon as usual. Mom usually did a quick sweep of the place, even before the attempted break-in, but this time something seemed off. It was just a very uneasy feeling the apartment had when walking in. My sister and I were ordered to stay downstairs by the front door while she investigated upstairs. We waited patiently and felt very unnerved, and when suddenly our mother's shrieking confirmed our suspicion. She came barreling down the stairs and ushered us out the door. We went to a neighbor's and phoned the police. My mom was barking at them. "Somebody is in our apartment." The police responded pretty quickly and I was able to understand the situation finally. The bedroom had a walk-in closet that contained the hatch to the attic that connected to the entire building's AC and heat. There were shelves that were pretty high up, lining the closet walls. My mom walked in to find a dirty pair of man's tighty-whitey underwear lying on the floor. That was enough to send her running and phoning the police. However, the investigation revealed something more. The attic hatch had been disturbed. Just to add, the police found full handprints on the shelves in the closet. The noises I heard the previous night were more than likely this man hoisting himself back up into the crawl space, using the shelves to climb after visiting us. The man was taken into custody, but I don't recall what the sentencing was. I need to look into it. Coincidentally, my older brother is now a homicide detective for that area. We ended up moving into my grandmother's house shortly after. This happened about 2 weeks ago to me and my brother and is still freaking us out. My brother is 14 and I am 17. We live in British Columbia, Canada in a farming area. Not much happens here. Anyway, we were messing around in our dad's office because he is an audiophile and has a shit ton of expensive equipment. We mess around with it when he and my mom are out of town. Total setup is probably worth around $30,000. At around 4 p.m., we heard little branches breaking outside and didn't think anything about it. Maybe a little raccoon. My brother was trying to play rap songs on the sound system, but he kept messing about, so I took a little nap. At around 6, my brother violently wakes me up and says he hears somebody laughing by the back porch. Side note on my brother, probably 6'4" and 190 pounds of pure muscle, but gets easily scared. And I am 5'9" and 140 pounds, so being the big bro, I had to go check it out. It was really creepy. It got louder and louder and we started freaking out. We couldn't see the guy because the garage blocking the view from any window. He grabbed a Thor Warhammer replica made out of steel. I panicked and picked up a 3-day-old plate with nacho cheese stains on it. Yes, I could have gotten a knife. I am dumb. When we got out there, we saw nothing. Ran back inside and called their parents, who swiftly turned their car around and headed back home. 9 p.m. rolled around and we heard somebody tapping on the door in a really messed up way I can't describe. It sounded like he was molesting the door basically. My brother called 911 and we ran upstairs. But the area we live in has no surrounding community. Really, it would take a while to get here. We ran to his room and pushed his clothes dresser in front of the door. After a few minutes of sweat and my brother crying, suddenly, boom, 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 was all we heard for the next 30 seconds. He was trying to break in. The 911 dispatcher was still on the line and said they couldn't find the house. Where we live, it is cut off by a mountainside, so the only way to get to us was by back roads and trails. That's when my brother jumped on his computer over the Wi-Fi, played a Slim Thug song at full volume. It was the loudest beat drop I ever heard. The cops eventually heard it and found us, but it was too late. He was long gone. He got scared, I guess. Fast forward to last week, they found the same guy trying to break into another person's house and they pinned it to our case with his weird-ass knocking technique. He was clinically insane and had walked out of a mental facility and found our house. The cops told us he heard SpongeBob playing on the TV and wanted to watch it with us. So, thanks Nickelodeon. I just wanted to start out by saying how much I appreciate this subreddit, being a safe place to share these stories. I've shared a few stories in a previous post, but reading what others have shared has jogged my memory and also made me realize how messed up some of these situations really were. A year ago, my apartment complex decided that they wanted to renovate my unit, so I had to move out at the end of my lease. I live in Denver and rent is pretty ridiculous here as you can imagine, so I started worrying about finding something affordable in my neighborhood, which I love. I posted on the Nextdoor app to see if anybody in my neighborhood knew of any affordable rentals in the area. I immediately got a message from somebody named Joe, who said that one of the condos in his complex was going to be up for rent soon, and he knew the owner. He offered to get me in touch with the owner. I asked if he could send me pictures of the unit, and he asked if he could text me some pictures his neighbor took because the chat function on the app is really slow. I now feel stupid for doing this, but I gave him my phone number. I kid you not, I received a phone call from an unknown number within seconds. I normally don't answer calls from unknown numbers, but I was expecting a call from a number that wasn't saved in my phone. So I answered it. I was completely bewildered when the person said, "Hi, it's Joe. How's your day going?" Huh? It took me by surprise and I didn't know what to say. He started to shoot the shit on the phone, talking about how he works nights and how tired he is and how he takes care of his daughter while his girlfriend works during the day. I finally interrupted and said, "So, about the condo." He pretty much disregarded that and said, "I don't think my girlfriend would appreciate me talking to you, but I don't have to tell her, right?" I said I had to go and immediately hung up the phone. As soon as I did, he started texting me. It was really bizarre and alarming to me. I blocked his number and moments later, he found me on Facebook and sent me a friend request. I'm 32 years old, but it was so disturbing to me that I called my parents to tell them about it and how unnerved it made me. And the worst part is that on Nextdoor, even if your exact address isn't listed, your complex is. I was pretty certain that I didn't have my address visible on my profile, but I checked and sure enough, my address and unit number were public. Unable to contact me any other way, he started messaging me again on Nextdoor, asking if I wanted to go on a walk with him. You can't block or report people on the app, so I deleted it. One night a month or so later, I had a knock at my door around 10 o'clock on a weeknight. I looked out my peephole but couldn't get a good enough look at the person. He had his head down slightly. Either way, I don't answer the door for anyone I'm not expecting, especially not a random guy at 10 o'clock at night. Feeling panicked, I called my neighbor across the hall. She's an older woman and we look out for each other since we both live alone. I asked her if it looked like he was a delivery guy at the wrong door. She opened her door to get a look at the guy, and that spooked him because he literally ran away. I have no idea if this was the next door guy or not, but my gut tells me it was. This was a big wake-up call. I always felt like I practiced good online safety, but I didn't even know my address was visible on Nextdoor. I'll never be casual or lazy about privacy settings like that ever again. I'm 20 years old and a front desk agent at a mid-range hotel in a small East Coast city. I'm a full-time student at the university and live alone in a one-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood made up mostly of college students. At the hotel, I've had to deal with a fair amount of unpleasant or creepy people since a young woman in a customer service job seems like an easy target. I was used to old ladies yelling at me or inappropriately aged men making remarks on my appearance like, "You just have the most adorable smile," and "I'm sure you're a heartbreaker," and I've usually been able to deflect. When I work on weekdays, I'm always on the 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. shift, where we handle check-ins. It was a slow night where we only had 28 check-ins to deal with, and by 8 p.m. my coworker Mindy and I had done all of our tasks and were leaning over the front desk chatting and watching the news, which blared perpetually from the TVs in the lobby's breakfast area. We only had a handful of check-ins left, so we had kicked back with our deck of cards and Chinese takeout all over the desk. A younger looking man checked in, and I remember thinking he was cute-ish but definitely looked Republican. He had neat blonde hair, a boyish smile, and a weak chin, and was wearing khakis and a quarter zip fleece. We had a pretty regular interaction, save him making a lot of eye contact and smiling, and he went to his room. About half an hour later, he came back down and asked us where we could get alcohol. We told him the convenience store across the street had beer and wine, and he and I joked a little about how it was closing soon, so he had better run there. When he came back, he slid a 40 ounce across the desk towards me. With my customer service smile of vague cluelessness, I said, "What's this for?" "It's for you." He leaned against the desk. Front desk agents have to stand up, so the top tier of the desk was about chest height, and when he leaned over, he was right in my face. "Oh, I can't drink right now, but thanks. I think you should be the one to enjoy that." He was insistent, and I agreed I would take it to drink after work, and I went into the office and put it in with Mindy's stuff. She'd appreciated the free alcohol, but I didn't feel good about drinking a 40 from some too friendly dude. He hung around the desk for a while. Mindy is the type of person who can keep somebody talking for hours, even if they don't want to, because her brain never runs out of content and she treats everybody like she's known them for years. This meant that this guy, who I'll call Mr. Hanson, wasn't leaving anytime soon. They were talking about politics, and I heard him throw around some vaguely conservative rhetoric, but I pretended to be engrossed in my homework. He kept glancing over at me and trying to smile, but it was getting late. My feet hurt, and all I wanted was to be at home in my underwear, rolling a spliff with my cats all around me, instead of allowing some 35-year-old to think he could flirt. At one point, Mindy had to make a phone call, so he slid down the desk towards me. I looked up with my customer service smile back on. So, you go to a small liberal arts college, do you? My uniform shirt was short sleeves, so you could see a couple of tattoos on my arm, and I have a nose piercing, so I assumed that and the music theory homework I was working on informed his guess. No, I go to the University of... I'm going to censor it for privacy reasons. The city's main attraction besides its hippies and its breweries was my college, a pretty good state school, so it was somewhat surprising he didn't assume I went there instead. He was sizing me up, and I prayed that Mindy would be done with her phone call soon. But it was her long-distance boyfriend, and she had wandered into the back office to talk to him. He started talking about his experiences at his southern university and how he was a veteran but got injured. So he lived off a pension or something and didn't work, and was just touring New England right now. The conversation somehow turned to his love life, but I'm pretty sure I was spaced out by that point, thinking about how I was going to eat at least an entire frozen pizza when I got home. That I didn't pay attention to what he was saying until it was clear he had asked me a question. Would you do that? He asked. Would I do what? Get freaked out because I don't work. A lot of the chicks I date think it's weird, he said. I remember exactly what he said because I thought it was weird he called girls chicks and how he spat it out. I laughed nervously and said, I don't know, I don't think so. The hotel was on the smaller side, and I was very aware of the fact that Mindy and I were the only employees in the building right then. He began to ask me probing questions about my love life along the lines of, Are you single? No? Well, why do you like him? Why do you like him if he moved away? Do you think you'll be with him a long time? The last question freaked me out, and I wish I had asked him to stop asking me personal questions like that, but I'm polite to a fault even when I'm not working, so I kept smiling and laughing and giving friendly but impersonal answers. You are very warm, he told me. Have you ever worked with kids? He talked about how a lot of the girls he dated back wherever he was from, Ohio maybe, are shallow and materialistic, and how I seemed like such a down-to-earth girl, and I was such a cutie, and did I know about the girl next door trope? I imagine he was referring to my tattoos again. At this point, I was physically queasy and uncomfortable but couldn't disengage. Guest reviews are hugely important in the hospitality business, so at this hotel we are strictly trained to let guests treat you however they want. You just can't upset them. It would probably have been reasonable at this point to ask him to leave the front desk, but I felt helpless. And being assertive with people at work is against my instinct that it didn't even cross my mind to say anything. Because of this, I had to stay there listening to this guy and politely accepting compliments. I assumed he typically got away with it since he was attractive and clean-cut with a slight baby face. I kept praying for the phone to ring and for somebody to ask me to perform some sort of complicated and long task so I could get away, but the only time it did was when a neighboring hotel called to ask if we had printer ink. Mindy was on the phone in the back until eventually Sam, our night auditor, arrived, and I realized that this guy had monopolized the entire last 2 hours of my shift, trying to get me to sleep with him and or admit I secretly supported Trump. No, helping Mr. Hansen would take this as a cue to leave. I went into the office and got my coat and backpack. When I came back out to witness Sam come out the drawer, Mr. Hansen was still standing there. Well, I hope you have a good night, I said. Are you walking out this way? He gestured down the hallway, which led to all of the rooms as well as the door to the back parking lot. I told him I had parked out front, which thankfully was true, and was able to get to my car successfully. I sat there for a while responding to the text that had piled up on my phone while Mr. Hansen was diverting my attention. It was about a 10-minute drive from the hotel to my apartment downtown, and I noticed that a car was pulling out of the parking lot at the same time I was. It wasn't Mindy's car. She always stayed an extra half hour after her shift technically ended, but there was another hotel next door, so I assumed it was an employee or guest there. I wasn't too concerned when the Nissan was right behind me, but I noticed it had Florida plates, which a lot of rental cars around here do. I take a weird way to get across town after work, which involves cutting through the university hospital's enormous, needlessly complex parking lot, which spans about 3 blocks. It wasn't necessarily a quicker route, but I liked how there were never any cars there this time of night, and I could go as fast as I wanted to. In a Subaru Outback, so not cool in a way. The parking lot, as I said, is needlessly complex, which means stoplights, which all turn into blinking yellows after 9 p.m. Medians and grassy areas placed seemingly at random, and a lot of twists and turns, which all go to very specific buildings and exits. I'm explaining this parking lot in so much detail to express how strange it was that this rental car was following me on this pretty nonsensical route. It's not a way that any kind of maps would take you, since there are more straightforward streets surrounding the parking lot. I initially assumed it was someone going to the hospital since it was the only major medical facility in about a 100-mile radius and the only well-funded one in an even larger area. A lot of people and their families stayed at the hotel who were there for the hospital, so the momentary explanation I gave myself seemed feasible. It was maintaining a polite distance, but it was one of those cars with the ultra-bright LED lights which were blinding in my mirrors, so the car was impossible to ignore. It followed me around each turn, and at one point, just to see, I went in a big circle around the south half of the lot. Surely enough, the other car made the same circle. My explanation, which was already crumbling, dissolved completely when I drove past the entrances to both the main hospital and an emergency room. Steady consumption of crime shows, scary movies, and true crime Reddit pages and podcasts has made me a very paranoid person. Serial killers really seem to love college-age women anyway, so at that point I picked up that something was probably wrong. I figured I should avoid going back to my real apartment, especially since it's just begging to be broken into with a lot of windows and a very old front door that opens directly to the outside. Obviously at this point I was relatively certain it was Mr. Hansen. Like I said, I had had guests cross the line before, making me come out from behind the desk to hug them, touching me when I'm straightening out the lobby, or asking the front desk to bring up a towel, answering the door in various states of undress. But I had never been followed or particularly fixated on. A hotel receptionist, even if they are good looking, is someone you have a couple of brief and pleasant interactions with, but you don't really think about them when they're not there. I decided my best bet would be to get back to the hotel. I looped back through town, the Nissan following me at a polite distance. I'll reiterate, he was trying to be as discreet as he could, keeping as far behind as he could while still keeping me in sight. He wasn't trying to intimidate me as much as, I'm not sure, monitor me? Whatever his reasons, I was still afraid. I abandoned the use of turn signals and sped back to the hotel, calling the hotel along the way and asking Sam if he and possibly the security guard we contracted to patrol the area after 11 p.m. could meet me at the front door. When I arrived back at the hotel, I pulled around to the front where Sam and the security guard were standing under the awning, while the Nissan hit the gas to the back lot. I explained the situation and the security guard went out the back door to look for the car and its driver. When he came back, he said that he spoke to a preppy blonde guy outside who was coming inside. He said he had just been out to smoke a cigarette and was now returning to his room. Security asked him if he'd seen a Nissan with Florida plates, and he said that he hadn't. There wasn't much more we could do at that point. Luckily, I wouldn't be working for a couple of days after Mr. Hansen was set to check out, and we were fully sold that weekend, so he couldn't extend his stay if he wanted to. All guests are asked, upon check-in, to write down the make, model, color, and plate of their vehicle on their registration card. So just to confirm, I pulled his red card. Sure enough, a silver Nissan Altima with Florida plates. Here's what he wrote on his TripAdvisor review. Edited a little bit for privacy. Great stay. The room was clean, the breakfast was hot, and that's all I can ask for. LOL. Best thing about this, name of the hotel brand, was the staff though. I had a lovely time with the two ladies at the front desk. My name especially, a very sweet girl. Hope to be seeing you sooner than later. Mr. Hansen, we won't meet because my manager put you on the banned list.